in the worst blizzard the valley had seen in 20 years. Stephen Reeves sat on a long cob bench, feeding it a handful of dry twigs. While men outside risked frostbite hauling logs, his bench burned so completely it produced enormous heat from almost no fuel. And that strange bench, which burned twigs for hours, would outlast the 6-month winter. But it began with laughter. 6 months earlier, when the aspens turned gold, Stephen Reeves dug clay from the creek bed and piled straw beside it. Neighbors watched him mix cob, wet clay and straw, into a thick paste, and they shook their heads.
You think mud and sticks will keep you warm out here? You've lost your mind, Reeves.
A bench that heats a room. Next, you'll tell me a rock can cook supper.
But Stephen only pressed a brick into the J-shaped burn tunnel with quiet precision, ignoring the mockery. And then came the first test fire. He fed a handful of dry twigs into the barrel mouth. The fire burned clean. The bench began to warm. Outside the window, the first heavy snow of winter began to fall, and something inside Stephen Reeves hardened.
Here is the secret, old boy. The smoke doesn't leave. It burns twice in that J-shaped tunnel. Not a wisp wasted.
And the cob mass soaks up every degree of heat, then lets it go slow, all through the night. By morning, the cabin was still warm and the frost on the window had turned to water. He had burned only a basket of twigs. A mile away, Tom Alden split the last of his seasoned cord. Knowing it wouldn't be enough, Stephen walked into the woods with a canvas sack and gathered fallen sticks, fuel that cost nothing.
Still burning your furniture, Reeves. Real men use real wood.
Tom's woodshed was nearly bare, and the real cold hadn't even started yet. Richard Croft counted his coins, convinced the long winter would make him richer than ever. That evening, Stephen fed the fire again. His bench as warm as a stone in summer. The dog stretched and sighed.
Let them laugh. I've got a bench that burns twigs for hours.
A storm rolled down from the peaks and buried the valley under 3 feet of snow overnight. The temperature dropped to 30 below. Stephen added a fresh layer of cob to his bench, thickening the thermal mass so it would hold heat even longer.
This will hold the heat all night. No axe needed, just a basket of twigs.
Tom Alden burned through his last cord in a week, his family shivering despite the fire. His woodshed was now a hollow shell, the winter only just begun.
Supply and demand, Alden. The price of warmth just went up.
Stephen gathered an armful of fallen branches, enough for a day of warmth.
Tom, you don't need logs. I can show you how to build a heater that runs on twigs.
And have my cabin smell like a smoldering sofa. I'll stick to real fires. Thanks.
The valley froze over. 2 men, 2 choices, and one would soon be forced to admit the other was right. Men risked the ridges for firewood, hauling sleds through whiteout. 1 trip too many, and a logger came back with 3 blackened toes. He would walk with a limp the rest of his life. A reminder that winter didn't just steal warmth, it stole futures. Inside Stephen's cabin, the only sound was the rustle of pages and the soft sigh of a dog stretched on a heated bench. At Tom Alden's place, Mary wrapped their coughing boy in every blanket they owned. He still shivered.
$10 a cord. Take it or freeze.
Reeves and his smoking couch. At least his kid isn't coughing.
The memory of Stephen's offer sat in Tom's chest like a hot coal, impossible to ignore, but too proud to touch. The blizzard howled on, indifferent to pride, indifferent to suffering. Stephen fed another bundle of twigs, the barrel glowing fierce orange, and felt not a single draft. But pride is a stubborn fire, and Tom would let it burn a little longer before he swallowed it. The blizzard struck with a ferocity that sealed the mountain pass for weeks, trapping the valley in a frozen prison. Tom's young son fought for every shallow breath, his tiny chest heaving. Mary's eyes brimmed with unspoken accusation. Tom stood in the hollow shell of his woodshed, the wind whistling through the gaps, knowing there was nothing left to burn.
I laughed at Reeves. I called it a smoking couch. And now my boy is freezing because of my pride. Mary, I am going to Reeves' place. If he turns me away, at least I tried.
A frantic knock on Stephen's door. A man hunched against the storm, shame and desperation carved into his frosted face.
Tom, good Lord, come in. What's happened?
You said that bench of yours burns twigs. I need to know how. My boy.
That same frigid night, Richard Croft heard the news and stared at his dwindling woodpile, the cold truth sinking in.
If people start burning twigs, I am finished. That heater's a fire trap. I'll make sure every soul in this valley knows it.
For 2 days, Stephen and Tom worked in the cold cabin, hands caked in cob, shaping the J-tunnel and bench.
The cob holds the heat like a rock baked in summer. Trust the process.
The first match trembled in Tom's hand. If it failed, his family would freeze. But the twigs caught clean. The smoke burned twice in the tunnel, and the barrel began to glow. Tears streamed down his wife's face as the bench began to warm. She whispered a prayer of thanks. The child stopped shivering for the first time in days, and Tom finally exhaled. Richard Croft stormed over when he heard. His face was a thundercloud.
You are a fool, Alden. That smoking couch will suffocate your family in their sleep.
It's already saved them, Richard. Go peddle your fears somewhere else.
Richard stormed off into the snow, but his eyes promised a reckoning. The first conversion was complete, and the merchant's kingdom was starting to crack. Richard Croft nailed warnings across the valley. Beware smoke benches, fire and fumes. Fear traveled faster than truth. Beyond the cabins, the hillsides betrayed the true cost. Stump after stump, the forest stripped raw. A thin couple with 2 children trudged to Stephen's cabin after dark, their faces gaunt with cold and shame.
I can help you, but you'll have to trust me. This bench won't poison you. It'll keep your children warm.
For 3 days, Stephen taught them to mix cob and shape the J-tunnel, just as he had with Tom. When they lit their first fire, the bench glowed, and the children stopped shivering. Word spread. Some families begged Stephen to teach them. Others clutched Richard's warnings and locked their doors.
He's going to burn this valley down, and you fools are handing him the matches.
The valley splintered into 2 camps, those who saw salvation in a basket of twigs, and those who still believed the merchant's lies. But the winter was far from over, and the true test of Stephen's strange bench was only beginning. A killing cold descended, 40 below, and the wind screamed like a living thing. In the holdout cabins, children coughed through the night, and parents watched their breath freeze indoors. But in Stephen's cabin and Tom's, the cob benches radiated heat. A basket of twigs lasted all night.
I called it a smoking couch. Now I call it a miracle. My boy is alive because of this bench.
Richard's warehouse fell silent. His customers had drifted away, gathering twigs instead of buying cords.
They'll come crawling back when the twigs run out. They'll see.
The line at Stephen's door grew each morning. Desperate faces, shivering, begging for the secret.
I can teach you. You need clay, straw, and a barrel. The forest gives fuel for free.
Beyond the village, logging continued, but now stumps outnumbered the standing trees. Richard watched from his window as his empire crumbled. The winter wasn't done, nor the fear he planned to spread. 3 days later, Stephen stood before a packed barn, a chalk diagram of the J-shaped burn tunnel on a slate behind him.
The smoke burns twice, in the tunnel and in the barrel. No waste, just heat that stores in the cob.
The barn door slammed open. Richard Croft stood there, face crimson, his voice a weapon.
This man is a fraud. His smoking couch will poison your children with invisible fumes.
My boy stopped coughing the night we lit that bench, Richard. Your lies can't warm a frozen room.
The crowd rumbled. A farmer shouted, "We're done buying your wood." Richard's face twitched.
I'll teach anyone who wants to learn. Clay, straw, and a barrel. The forest gives fuel for free.
A dozen families stepped forward that night. Names on a list, hope rising above the fear.
You've destroyed me, Reeves, but I'm not finished. You'll regret this.
Stephen didn't flinch. Then regret is mine to carry. The valley will stay warm. Richard cornered Stephen behind the barn later. His tone had changed. No fury, just calculation.
I'll give you half my profits if you stop teaching. Keep your bench. Just stop spreading it.
Same answer as in the barn. The valley needs this, not your money.
Richard said nothing. But next morning, a family built a heater wrong on his advice. Within hours, cob cracked and gray smoke seeped in. Panic spread like fire. Voices that once praised the bench now whispered of poison and deceit. Stephen knelt, tracing the hairline fracture. Not a design flaw, sabotage.
This crack isn't from heat. The cob mix is wrong. Someone told them to cut corners.
Richard's shadow loomed again. The movement held its breath. Everything Stephen built rested on proving the bench wasn't the problem, and whether the people would trust him again. The next morning, Stephen called half the valley to the failing heater. He would fix it before their eyes.
The crack isn't the bench's fault. This family used too little clay in the cob. It dried too fast and split.
The father confessed. Richard Croft told us we could use less clay to save money. He swore it would be fine. A murmur swept the crowd. Tom stepped forward, voice hard.
That man nearly killed a family just to save his wallet. He's not a merchant, he's a criminal.
Richard, watching from the back, turned pale. His sabotage had just backfired into a confession. Stephen finished repairing the bench, smoothing fresh cob into the crack.
Built right. This bench is safe. Let this be the proof.
That evening, 7 more families came forward, not with doubt, but with shovels and barrels. Richard's last card was played, and he had lost. The valley was now a movement, not just a promise. 3 nights later, a neighbor overheard Richard Croft muttering through a whiskey haze, "I'll burn him out."
He's threatening to torch Reeves' place. Grab a rifle. We're standing guard tonight.
Half a dozen neighbors grabbed rifles and lanterns, forming a ring around Stephen's cabin in the dark. The next day, Stephen threw open the barn doors for a mass building. Families poured in with clay and barrels. Tom's woodpile stood untouched beneath a hand-painted sign. Firewood for sale, cheap. A testament to the heater. Richard's warehouse echoed empty. His last customers now carried baskets of twigs, not logs. He stood in his doorway, watching smoke rise from a dozen cob chimneys. No one needed his wood. By nightfall, a dozen new benches glowed across the valley. The forest line held still. No fresh stumps. The bank sent a letter. Richard Croft's loan was denied. Without sales, he couldn't pay. But a cornered animal is dangerous. The valley guarded its warmth, but the winter wasn't finished. The thaw came not with a roar, but with 1,000 drips. Icicles wept, and the snow pulled back like a blanket. A bank agent nailed a seizure notice on Richard Croft's warehouse. Every log, every cord, now belonged to the creditors.
All that timber, worthless now. Reeves and his cursed bench. It wasn't supposed to end like this.
That afternoon, Richard found Stephen mending a fence, the valley greening behind him.
You did this to me. You and your twig-burning joke. I had a business, a life.
No, Richard, you did this. The valley just learned to warm itself without your price.
Richard's fists clenched. For a moment, violence hung in the air. Then he turned away, a defeated hulk. Children gathered kindling in the forest, their voices rising as they filled baskets. The old woodpiles stood untouched. From the ridge, the settlement spread below, a dozen thin smoke plumes, each from a cob bench, each a family free from debt. Richard Croft's kingdom had crumbled, but the valley wasn't done with him yet. Richard Croft loaded his last belongings onto a splintered wagon, a few tools, a worn coat, and a bitterness that weighed more than both. He took one long look at the valley. the thin threads of smoke from a dozen cob chimneys, and spat into the mud. No one came to wave farewell. The road out was as empty as his warehouse. From his porch, Stephen Reeves watched the wagon shrink to nothing. The dog leaned against his leg.
Not triumph. Just quiet. That's enough.
Tom Alden walked up the porch steps, his boy healthy on his hip.
You saved my family, Stephen. I was too proud to see it, but I do now.
You saved your own, Tom. I just gave you the match.
Word spread that evening. The timber merchant was gone, and the valley breathed easier. That night, Stephen fed his bench a handful of twigs and let the warmth wash over him. The winter had been conquered. By summer, the benches had become kitchens. Women cooked stew on the cob surface. Fed by twigs, a communal kindling shed rose at the village center, where children sorted twigs by size. The forest began to heal. Where stumps had scarred the hillsides, green shoots pushed through. One evening, Tom and Stephen sat on the bench, watching the sunset through the window.
A trader from the next valley came asking about the benches, word spreading.
Good. The more people burn twigs, the fewer trees fall.
That night, a map on Stephen's wall showed pins marking each cabin with a heater. A trader copied the diagram into a leather journal, vowing to carry the design north. The valley had learned to warm itself without stripping the mountains bare, and in the quiet of his cabin, Stephen Reeves smiled, feeding another handful of twigs. A traveling trader arrived at Stephen's cabin, his eyes wide at the bench radiating heat from a mere handful of twigs.
I'll teach you how it works. The J tunnel burns smoke twice, and the cob holds heat like a rock.
Stephen drew the diagram for him on a piece of slate, pointing to the burn tunnel and the cob bench.
Take this design. No charge. Just promise to teach whoever asks.
The trader nodded, vowing to carry the knowledge to the next valley and beyond. Far from the valley, Richard Croft now earned pennies, splitting kindling, a ragged woodcutter, in a stranger's camp. The man who had once mocked Reeves now lived by the axe, a grim poetic justice. He glanced toward the distant mountains, perhaps remembering the empire he had lost. Back in Stephen's Valley, the trader's wagon rolled out at dawn, the diagram tucked like treasure. The twig-burning bench would not stay a valley secret. It was destined to change the frontier. When winter returned a year later, the valley did not cower. From every chimney, a thin plume rose, each from a bench that burned twigs. Children raced through the snow with baskets, gathering kindling like a treasure hunt. Inside his cabin, Stephen sat on the same bench, a book in hand, the dog snoring softly. The wood pile outside his door had not shrunk. He hadn't split a log all winter. The barrel glowed orange, the fire consuming twigs without a trace of smoke. Through the frost-rimed window, other cabins glowed softly across the snow, each a pocket of warmth. A neighbor brought honey from his first harvest, and they shared the quiet triumph of a promise kept. The dog stretched on the bench, a picture of contentment. Stephen fed another handful of twigs, and the strange bench burned on, exactly as it had that first winter. One evening, Tom Alden arrived at Stephen's cabin, carrying a carved plank.
Thought this old couch deserved a name.
Inside, he nailed it to the wall above the bench.
The twig-burning couch. I like it.
The words, "the twig-burning couch," were carved into the pine, a testament to mockery turned into enduring warmth. The dog yawned and stretched, indifferent to the ceremony. Stephen ran a hand over the warm cob, the same bench that had once been mocked.
They called it a smoking couch once. Now it's just home.
Hard to believe we laughed at you for this.
Laughter's cheap. Twigs are free.
The timber merchant who had mocked him loudest never understood what Stephen built that autumn. And in that warm cabin, a strange bench that burned twigs for hours had outlasted the 6-month winter, and everything that laughed at it. Spring came again, melting the snow into streams. The bench, still warm, became a hearth for the whole valley. On the hillsides, green shoots swallowed the old stumps. The forest was healing. In summer, The cob benches stayed warm for cooking. Fed by twigs gathered in the cool morning, children no longer feared the winter. They knew the forest would always provide kindling. Autumn painted the valley gold. Tom and Stephen sat on the porch, watching leaves fall.
Never thought I'd say this, but I am looking forward to winter.
It's just another season now. As long as the bench is warm.
Under a star-filled sky, the cabin glowed. Inside, the twig-burning bench was the heart of it all, and on the bench, the dog slept on, dreaming of endless warmth. The strange bench had become a legend, but to those who lived with it, it was simply home. The flames danced in the barrel mouth, consuming nothing but fallen sticks. On the bench, the dog slept, a picture of warmth that defied the frozen world outside. Through the frost-rimed window, the valley lay buried in snow. But inside was a pocket of summer. Stars wheeled above the cabin, indifferent to the small miracle below. He built a strange bench that burned twigs for hours, and it changed everything. No more shipments of logs, no more frozen nights. Just a basket of twigs and a bench that held the heat. The forest remained. The valley thrived, and the laughter that began it all had long since faded. The strange bench had outlasted the winter, and the doubt, and the greed, and the cold, all because one man believed in mud, straw, and a handful of twigs. Morning light touched the frozen valley, but the cabin was already warm. Stephen stepped outside, a basket in hand, and walked into the forest with the ease of a man who had tamed winter. Inside, the dog still slept, the bench radiating the last of the night's warmth. He returned with a handful of dry twigs, the same fuel that had outlasted crisis and mockery. The barrel glowed orange, and the bench drank the heat, storing it for the long night ahead. The carved sign hung above, the twig-burning couch. No one laughed anymore. From the porch, he watched the valley wake. A dozen chimneys breathed thin smoke, each one a family safe. The woodpiles stood untouched, monuments to a new way of living. The dog opened one eye, then closed it again. Nothing to worry about. And so, the valley slept warm that night, cradled by the strangest of benches, a gift of mud, straw, and a handful of twigs. The fire had burned through the longest nights, consuming nothing but fallen twigs. Fuel the forest gave freely. It had not merely warmed a single cabin, it had transformed a community, and the design would travel far beyond. The dog, stretched across the bench, dreamed of nothing at all, absolute trust in the warmth below. Stephen Reeves built no empire. He never sold a single bench. He gave the knowledge away, and that was enough. The timber merchant, who had laughed loudest, now cut kindling for pennies in a stranger's camp. His empire ash, but the cob bench endured, a living hearth that softened hearts and heated homes without a trace of waste. Under the turning of the stars, the little cabin on the ridge glowed, a beacon of stubborn ingenuity. The strange bench that burned twigs for hours became something far greater, a symbol of what is possible when wisdom meets soil. And so, as another winter buried the mountains, the valley rested easy in the warmth of a humble idea, all because one man built a strange bench that burned twigs for hours.